Penn State is loaded coming into 2023, but it's the play of Drew Allar. Can he live up to those expectations in 2023? And where does Drew Allar look right now in fall camp as we head towards the season? I'm set to break it all down with Zach Seyko from Locked on Nittany Lions.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Last season, it was the run game that really exploded for the Penn State Nittany Lions last season, even though they had a quarterback at Sean Clifford that set multiple school records at Penn State. The run game really was the focal point of the team with those two great freshmen last season, but it's the passing game that really intrigues me here this season. And now we bring in Zach Seyko from Locked on Nittany Lions. All the focus right now, Zach, is on Drew Allar, Drew Allar, Drew Allar. I've said on this channel before, I believe he is the most talented quarterback to ever step foot into State College. Do you share that thought as well?
Yeah, when you look at the modern recruiting era, I think that's the case. Christian Hackenberg is, of course, up there. Okay, when you bring them in as pure 5-star recruits, okay, Christian Hackenberg and Drew Allar were not the consensus number one, but they were up there. Some people had them number one, number two, number three. They seem to be consensus top three. Anthony Morelli, I guess, was in that conversation. So as far as the most talent, I think Christian Hackenberg was well on his way to being more talented. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to watch guys like Kerry Collins play. So I know there's a lot of people that are vintage Penn State fans and would say, well, it's Kerry Collins. It's Kerry Collins, something along the lines of that nature. He did win national titles for them, right? So Drew Allar has to match that standard. Until there's another national championship brought to Penn State, it's going to be someone like Kerry Collins who takes that. But in this modern day of recruiting, when you have on 24/7 rivals, the rest of them, and people are constantly, you didn't have that constant breaking down of high school tape and building up these players to play as soon as possible as freshmen. Those days of sitting and waiting your turn are almost non-existent anymore, and you fall short of expectations. So Drew is ahead and progressing very nicely, but unless he can't win, if he wins the Heisman and the national championship, then yeah, he goes down as the best. But in terms of pure talent, it's hard to argue that he's not, just because of all the tangibles that he has right now.
Well, you mentioned Kerry Collins. You could go back to Todd Blackledge as well, and what they've been able to do. Yeah, recruiting rankings definitely weren't as prevalent back then, definitely as they are now with all the services that you mentioned. So you've been at fall camp. You've been able to get your eyes on Drew Allar, and with the expectations that we talked about at the top of this segment, do you feel from what you've seen thus far in fall camp that he can reach those expectations? Maybe he can even exceed those expectations in 2023. How is he gelling with everybody in camp so far?
I'll preface this. We're not as spoiled as we'd like to be in the media industry here when it comes to State College, Penn State. So we get to see some select position drills for about 10, 15 minutes as far as actual team plays, formations, and everything else. But you get a little bit of a tease. You get a little bit of an understanding of what Penn State is trying to do. And I know that we're going to talk about this, but as far as answering if Drew Allar is gelling, and that's the whole point of this, is getting in that rhythm. They're going to build an offense that is tailored around him, but they're going to use some of the other strengths that they have with Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, and asking Mike Yursich that specifically as far as what they're going to do with the likes of those guys, because last year, not really much of a factor in the receiving game, but now you can get them a little more involved. We saw the T formation a year ago, short yardage situations. People are under the understanding that if you really read between the lines of what Mike Yursich wants to do, go back to Oklahoma State when he was the offensive coordinator with two names that most college football fans should be familiar with, Justice Hill and Chuba Hubbard. Those guys are in the NFL. Now, they don't have these lavish careers, but they were good at Oklahoma State. And you look at the film, they were on the field in these split shotgun 2-back sets. So there's going to be some new wrinkles to the offense for Penn State. Drew Allar looks comfortable. He was in those games a season ago for this exact reason, to get comfortable and to be comfortable. So that's the scenario where he's going to look totally lost in the first 4 games is not going to be the reality of it.
Boy, we got to talk about that power tee later on. I love that power
Yep.
tee, what we saw in the Rose Bowl last season. But that was a good segue from what you were talking about. I got some video that you sent me from fall camp, and this stuff really intrigued me. There's 3 clips. 2 kind of go together, and then 1 is kind of on its own a little bit. Let's kind of break it down a little bit. Right here, you look at both Allen and Singleton in the backfield. Singleton kind of gets it on a pitch out here. We get the exact opposite. Fake to Singleton, throw it out to Kaytron Allen. And this one right here, the next one really intrigued me, where you split Nick Singleton out wide. This is a back shoulder throw, and obviously it ends up pretty good in practice. But I want to kind of break down those 2 things. First, that formation when you see Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton right next to Drew Allar. That's as good as it gets in the country, those 3 guys back there in the backfield. How often do you think we're going to see those 3 guys, Allen and Singleton, both next to Allar, as compared to maybe just one of them in the backfield at a time?
I mean, that very well be your base formation. Now, you don't want to completely exhaust your options. And that's why Trey Potts becomes even the more valuable, because a season ago, you had Singleton and Allen being on the field separately. But in this case, now, other than the T formation, but now you're going to have them on the field together. And that misdirection, that option read is simply, you can do so many different things with that. Just imagine this. This is something that I brought up on my podcast too, Locked on Nittany Lions. Imagine a fake to Kaytron Allen going a counter to the left. The entire defense has to respect that. These guys are almost equivalent. Sure, Singleton's faster, but you talk to Kaytron Allen, I'm pretty sure he'd say, well, I'm the best running back in the Penn State locker room. And then Nicholas Singleton would say, well, no, I am. That's how good they are. They're good at different things. And that's a good thing for Penn State. So imagine a counter play out of that shotgun going to Kaytron Allen. Your defense has to respect that. Your front 7 is going to bite. And then a swing pass out. Now Nicholas Singleton with a full head of steam, a lot of momentum, completely open field. How do you game plan for that? And then you can fake the handoff, fake the pitch out to Nicholas Singleton, and then you have a quick slant to maybe Keandre Lambert-Smith, Dante Cephas, or any of those guys, or a tight end up the seam. Mike Yurcich, watch the film from him in Oklahoma State when he had Hubbard and Hill in the backfield. And something about it too, they went fast. So don't think, oh, well, Drew Allar's a pocket quarterback. Penn State would never speed up the tempo. They're going to go fast because defense is the wear and tear. It's going to Singleton, Allen, Singleton, Allen, Singleton, Allen. Boom, that play action fake over the top. And defenses won't be able to adjust with those athletes in the backfield potentially getting the football in any given play.
So you talk about the tempo of the offense. Yeah. Could we see in these, you talk about read plays in the backfield, RPOs, of course, all the rage in today's game as well. Could we see Drew Allar, and maybe a lot of people, like you said, kind of view him as a pocket passer? Could we see him as just another added weapon to the run game a little bit in some read plays, or is it mostly going to be focused on those 2 guys in the backfield?
Well, they pulled Sean Clifford back a little bit. Sean Clifford wasn't always a running quarterback, and I wouldn't describe him as a dual threat, but he was running a lot early on in his career. Now, those, granted, were different offensive coordinators, but it's the same thing with Allar. Do you really want to put him in harm's way? Do you want your 5-star quarterback really trying to take it on a 1st and 10? I can see this on 3rd and 5, a design quarterback draw up the middle, right? You're not expecting that. Allar can move. He's not a statue. Watch the film. Watch the games where he came in a season ago, and you'll see the pass rush. It looks like they're going to take him down. He doesn't stand still. I really like Drew Allar's pocket presence. And in the blue-white game, he did tuck it a few times and ran for about 7 to 10 yards on separate occasions. So just because he's 6'5", 240 pounds, which is great ideal size, he can beat you in a foot race. And I think we'll have a few, and he'll quarterback sneak it out of the T formation. I think a few times. So Drew Allar should have a few rushing touchdowns himself, on top of being a secret weapon when you do need those 5 crucial yards on a 3rd down, or really to convert in the red zone.
Okay, let's talk about that last clip that you sent me. That was pretty exciting, right? Seeing both Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton with Drew Allar in the backfield. That's one thing. But then we split out Nick Singleton to the outside, and when I saw this, I'm like, oh, can of worms open. That's exactly what I thought. And the next thing I thought of was Reggie Bush in the mid-2000s, right? Yeah. When they used to split him out a little bit. It wasn't that they're going to line up Reggie Bush. and throw it to him on a go route 40 yards down the field. It was all about getting him the football in space.
Yeah.
Are we going to see, how much maybe do you think we're going to see Nick Singleton? Boy, this is blowing my mind as I'm saying this. Nick Singleton on the outside lined up amongst other wide receivers and maybe with Kaytron and Drew Allar in the backfield.
Yeah, you can do that's another part of the deception in this offense. You can motion out Singleton. You can motion out Allen too. I thought Allen's always been the better pass catcher because he comes from IMG Academy.
Okay.
I had the privilege of watching some Nicholas Singleton games up close in person at the high school level, and he came from a predominantly a run first only offense. They didn't have to pass the football because you had Nicholas Singleton at the high school level, who ended up becoming the National Gatorade Player of the Year. But now I asked Mike Yursich that, how far has Singleton, both of them, how far have you come as a pass catcher? And they agreed that he's made leaps and bounds. So yeah, you could have both of them on the field. It's the deception of, okay, you ultimately tip your hand and say that this is going to be a passing play. Maybe Allar could sneak it up the middle on a 3rd and 5, but if you leak Singleton out to a wide receiver position, whether it's the slot, it's the boundary, same with Allen, you got to put a linebacker on him. You're not going to put a cornerback or a safety on him. Now you got to take one of your worst pass defenders on defense against Singleton, who's an all world-class athlete, and same with Allen. Allen has the better hands. Maybe Singleton's gained some ground on that, but it was noticeable a season ago that Allen was just the better pass catcher. I think Singleton might be the better route runner just because of where they are in terms of overall athleticism. It's no secret that Singleton's faster. And I'm glad that somebody finally brought up the Reggie Bush comparison, because I see Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen as the modern day Reggie Bush and Lendell White. And the only thing, now someone did bring this up to me. They said, well, he can't be Reggie Bush because he hasn't been used in the passing game as much. Well, here we go. Year 2. I think our analysis here is going to live just up to that.
We might see it. You mentioned that about Kaytron Allen being the better pass catcher. It just kind of blows your mind. Now, both of these guys could kind of be in situations, because the first time when I saw that, I could see Nick Singleton on one side and Lambert Smith and maybe Dante Cephas on the other side as well. Let's talk about some of those other wide receiver targets right now, because that seems to be the popular mindset. Is you got Keandre Lambert Smith coming back as your number 1 with Mitchell Tinsley and Parker Washington out of state college. Dante Cephas, a lot of people have a lot of smoke behind him as maybe the number 2. Who are some other guys? Because that's a big point. Wide receiver depth for the Nittany Lions. If maybe we want to see Drew Allar get to his full potential, who are some of those other guys that could help Drew out in the depth in this wide receiver room?
Keandre Lambert Smith has come a long way, really. From he was always someone that Penn State fans were waiting to break out. When's he going to break out? When's he going to take that next step? And he did down the stretch of the season. Michigan State final home game of the year, final regular season game, and then in the Rose Bowl as that deep threat target. Now the projection, we don't have an official depth chart yet at this point, but we anticipate that KLS will move inside to the slot. And that's just how versatile he is, because now you bring in Dante Cephas, another veteran, all MAC conference, to play your X wide receiver. If you're looking for somebody else, I know that from the Big Ten point of view, Trey Wallace is a name that people need to know about. In spring practice before Dante Cephas, because he could even be mentioned, because it'd be a recruiting violation since he committed, but he wasn't officially transferred in. James Franklin was not quick to praise a lot of the wide receivers. And at first that was concerning, but then he said Keandre Lambert Smith stands out and Trey Wallace stands out. He asked some of the players. I asked specifically Trey Wallace after one of those spring practices, and he said Amari Evans. So there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of competition for that 2nd and 3rd string spots at wide receiver. But if you're looking for your first 3, it's going to be Cephas, Lambert Smith, and Trey Wallace.
Gotcha. I just want to bring up a name that was recruited to come to Penn State a couple of years back, I think. 4-star, top 100 kid, Caden Saunders. Where does he kind of stand in the depth? Because he kind of had a little bit of hype to him when he kind of came into Penn State. Where does he kind of stand in all of this right now?
Well, looking at that next open practice that they had to the media, and then they're going to have an open practice to everybody in Beaver Stadium, which I think is very neat. And if you pay very close attention with the way that the drills are run, you can kind of get an idea of where people are. Like, the starters go first, okay? You're not having the true freshmen take the reps first with Drew Allar and Bo Pribula in this quarterback competition, right? And you look at the slot receiver from what we've seen, it looks like he's third on the depth chart. It's going to be Keandre Lambert-Smith, another Clifford, Liam Clifford, Sean Clifford's little brother being the second guy, and Caden Saunders. So if you're asking specifically about number 7, he looks like he's battling it out for that number 2 spot. It sounds like Clifford would have more of the inside track to be that next man up in the slot position. But never say never in fall camp that Saunders could. He had a really good blue and white game, and it looked like he had a lot of chemistry and symmetry with Drew Allar as a part of the starting first group when he was in there. So Saunders did have a rough first year. That seems to be the case from what we now know. But he's certainly looked good in public flashes, blue and white game, and then in practice but he hasn't been brought up. But neither is Clifford, and neither have been some of the other guys.
Let's talk about this run game a little bit. We know how good it is. We know how good the offensive line is going to be. How important is the run game to the success of the pass game of Drew Allar? I think kind of when I look at it, I look at this dynamite run game. Just how much is Allar going to throw the football? Just how prevalent is this pass game going to be? How do you think the balance is going to play out in 2023?
It's going to be run heavy at first because Drew Allar still has to get used to starting action. I'm glad that it's great that he saw Indiana's second and third string defense late in the game when it's completely out of reach. These are now meaningful snaps. These are now meaningful plays. And when you have Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen in this offensive line who are basically all back from a year ago, why throw Drew Allar into the fire? Why put so much pressure on him when now you have what works so well for Michigan? Okay, what works so well for Ohio State, where you can close out games. That was something that Penn State missed desperately in 2021. This has always been the formula too. Saquon Barkley's a different story, but then when you look back to after Sanders and Barkley, because they were the feature backs, and you see they were very early picks in the NFL draft, but then Journey Brown and Noah Cain. That was supposed to be the formula, and then the injuries happened in 2020. Journey Brown has, of course, the off the field, the health condition that doesn't allow him to play football anymore, and now he's a race car driver, for crying out loud. But it's always supposed to have been that dynamic duo. They lost that in 2020 because of the injuries. In 2021, they couldn't duplicate it with Kane and a Kevon Lee, who kind of progressively emerged, but was never that true featured back. And now they have that. That's what they want. So why get away from what works and put all this pressure on? All right, Drew, you got to run the football up and down the field, and we got to have an air raid offense like a vintage Mississippi State, for example, or Texas Tech.
Yep. Boy, I tell you what, Zach, you for a young quarterback, lots of expectations. He's got the two things. He's got the run game, and he's got the all-everything tackle. So you got to think things are going to work out pretty well in terms of that. Zach, I want to thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
A lot of expectations for Penn State this season. Thanks again for joining me today.
Appreciate it. Absolutely.
Thanks for watching Big Ten TED, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten TED to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.